Welcome back to another episode of the Red Nation podcast. This conversation took place right after the Red Nation was invited and able to participate in the second edition of the World Social Alternative, Alternativa Social Mundial, organized by ALBA-TCP, which is the Bolivarian Alliance Commercial Treaty for the Peoples of the Americas, and the Simón Bolívar Institute in Caracas, Venezuela, the 23rd and 24th of July of this year. And in this particular forum, there were many topics that were covered, specifically communication and resistance. This is a framework that was given to analyze the international disinformation campaigns created to discredit not only the elections in Venezuela, but the different rightful struggles of liberation throughout the world, and where communication militancy plays a fundamental role in counteracting hegemonic media. Please support the Red Nation podcast. Become a Patreon at Red Media, which is the home of the Red Nation podcast. Red Media is an indigenous media project run entirely for and by indigenous people. And we were actually going to put this episode behind a paywall, but we decided to make sure that this was open to everybody, given the disinformation that has been basically been put forward around the Venezuelan elections. So please join the Red Nation podcast, become a Patreon, and welcome.
Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
All right. So how do you feel, Mayra?
Good.
Good.
I feel great. We're here in Venezuela. Very happy. We arrived 2 days ago.
Yes. Late Sunday night and early Sunday morning.
Yeah.
All right. So let's start by telling the people what we're doing and why we're here. And it starts with the invitation. So it's all in Spanish. Mayra, I need your help.
So we're here invited by the Instituto Simón Bolívar for the Peace and Solidarity Amongst the Peoples, ISB, to participate as international observers of the presidential elections happening on the 28th of July 2024. So we arrived earlier than that, so almost a whole week before that, invited by the Institute. And so as Red Nation, we're basically international observers, along with a group of about 130 people, something like that, from all over the world.
I don't even know how many people there were today. So today is day 2 of the program, and it was for what did they call it? The World Social Alternative, from Bolívar to Chávez. And they had the entire theater just filled with people. There's a bunch of panels happening since yesterday. So we got the invitation. Nick got the invitation. And we were invited through Nick to be here, to come to Venezuela to witness the presidential elections. Basically just to tell the truth to the world about the Venezuelan elections, that they're participatory and that Venezuela is actually a leading democracy. But you wouldn't know that if you're in the US or any other imperialist nation. And yeah, so we just wanted to debrief about the last 2 days. I guess we can go over the program a little bit. So there has been a total of 6 panels. The panel number 1 was Communication and Resistance, the Role of Media in Current Geopolitics. Panel number 2 was, the plenary session was World Social Alternative and Current Challenges. And then panel number 2 was Alternative for Self-Determination. Panel number 3 was Alternative for People's Rights and Reparations. Panel number 4 was Alternative for Unalterable Peace. Panel number 5 was Alternative for Economic Justice. And panel number 6 was Justice in Politics, Alternative for Justice in Politics. And then they had a closing of the meeting, Alternative for World's Balance. And it has been a great time. First of all, I am just so impressed by how this has been organized.
Yes.
Like, we are being taken care of. I mean, just like Madam President, you know? Like, we're here, staying in like a super nice hotel. Every meal we have is just like top tier. Like, we're talking like
full nutrition,
vegetables, just delicious, good whole foods.
Yes.
And a cute little dessert every time.
Yes. It does not go unnoticed.
Yeah.
That little detail. And just the fresh fruits, you know, that all the aguas frescas that we're giving all the time. So yeah, you definitely feel the earth here and the land here providing.
And again, I appreciate this level of organization because they have brought people from across the entire world. I met people from China. I met people from Russia. I know there's people from Germany, and of course, all throughout the Americas. First day, let's maybe start with the first day.
Yeah.
So by the time we had got there, they were opening. And the first panel that they had was the role of media in current geopolitics, communication and resistance. And, you know, just reading the title alone, I feel like you don't really, or I guess I feel like I was like, okay, yeah, cool, we're going to talk about that. But that's actually one of the most important things
Exactly.
to be talked about. The whole reason that Venezuela is in this situation where they're having to fly in international observers and delegates is because of just the blatant lies that the media has spread. Western media and media of the global north has just spread about Venezuela to attempt to suffocate it. And they really emphasized media literacy. And as Mayra and I were leaving the panels and events today, we were kind of just debriefing a little bit in the bus. And, you know, we weren't talking about media literacy just yet. We're talking about the panels today. But our entire conversation led back to media literacy.
Exactly.
Like, that is like the indoctrination tool. Like, that is why, you know, because just being in Venezuela, like, so many thoughts. Like, I couldn't help but get emotional yesterday. I did talk during panel number 3.
Yes.
And during the talk, I couldn't help but get emotional, just like basking in Venezuela, just being surrounded by people who like understand the thing, who in a very like material way. And it is just like, it's such a breath of fresh air. It's so inspiring, but at the same time, it's a little bit bittersweet because you just kind of realize like how lacking everyone back home is. Like, just the most like basic thing, like, hey, we need to be anti-imperialists if we want to save ourselves and the world. Like, that idea in the US and in the reservations is just so like, I guess like incomprehensible. Like,
yes.
It's like, and it's all because of the media. It all goes back to that. Even before coming out here, you know, I was getting asked questions like, are you going to be safe? And like, this exactly. is the most taken care of I've ever been. Like,
period.
Yeah. and it's like, why would the people think that?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's because of the media. Before coming to Venezuela, like I have, admittedly, I do only have like, I feel surface level knowledge of Venezuela, especially for someone in the Red Nation. But I did a lot of studying before coming out here also. I went through all of our podcasts. Nick, thank you for everything. Like, he just laid some groundwork for us. And when he was out here back in like I think it was like the 2020, like a few years ago, and he was really just going gun-ho getting all those interviews, like I was listening to them back then, but I didn't fully understand how big of a deal it was until I got here, like several years later. I feel kind of bad, but like just such gratitude to Nick for all of that. So I was listening to our podcast and reading through Tricontinental, and I got curious about like what Western media is saying. So I looked at CNN and they're talking about Maduro, like they're basically saying like authoritarian strongman up against bird-loving grandfather. God. and this is like considered a credible news source.
Exactly.
And I remember, I don't even remember where, I think during that panel, they're just going through like just some blatant lies, but the fact that they're taken as credible, and that's why media literacy is so important. Like the fact that I think one of the panelists had even said like that she personally was asked like, are condoms really $400 out there? Okay. Like because the media that they got that information from was taken so seriously.
Exactly.
And yeah, so I just thought that, like, after today and our conversation, just circling back to that initial panel, I thought was kind of a profound realization for me. It really just reestablished the importance of the Red Nation podcast for me too. And Melanie and I did have a conversation before all of this, just talking about how powerful our voices are, how powerful our words are, how our words can literally change the material reality of things sometimes. And that message or that idea hasn't been more clear for me than now.
Yes, and it was a great choice to open up the panels and open up the event, this second summit of world alternative, social alternative. We really were able. I wasn't present throughout the whole panel because I arrived super early that day, but I was able to catch the last few phrases and conclusions on that panel. And it's precisely how influential nowadays is all the media work. Like, so for good or for bad, like the power, it's unquestionable. So how as people that come to Venezuela from outside, I mean, maybe because we're a little more aware and we're studying and we're trying to see these struggles or something, some kind of a guide. We know a little bit about it, but the general public just follows, and these tropes are everywhere. I mean, in Mexico are the same. In Mexico, it's always this relationship between Venezuela and Cuba. Like, so any critique of politics as they are, or center or left or right politics, are like immediately like responded with this trope of like, oh, so you want to end up like Venezuela? Also, you want to end up like Cuba? Like, we're going to be like, any alternative to capitalism means starvation and lack of anything. And in reality, that's just gives you an idea of how far these discourses are in terms of all the things that an alternative social idea of a world can actually do for its people, because that's all we see when we're here. This amazing solidarity amongst people, this willingness to help, to talk, to share, and I was here as another part of Red Nation invitations to Venezuela, and I've seen already a big difference between those pandemic years and how Venezuela was, from now. There's this like vibrancy and this happiness and this excitement that you feel amongst the people, and it's just really exciting to be here. It's great also to just go into these deep conversations, with all the fellow, people that are struggling in the world, in the global south mainly. So we've heard people from Brazil, from many countries in Africa, Bolivia, yeah, exactly. The community of feminists from Bolivia, and all of them just sharing this gratitude for Venezuela's example of a struggle of liberation that has actually achieved so much. And I think that's I was telling you about how I felt that in Cuba many years ago, and that I haven't felt that until I came back, now, and the first time I came to Venezuela, like this feeling that you belong, that the struggles are working towards, uniting, creating networks, and that every single conversation that you have here has an impact, because you know that you are reaching to a whole community, and that community is reaching out to you through these voices of these, fighters. So, and so for moments you feel like all those distinctions and differences are sort, not that they're not relevant, but can be overcome, because there's this one purpose, right? This purpose that being here, like you said, materialized, then it just gives you, just like in Cuba, it just gives you this idea that horizon is there, that it can be achieved. And like you said in your presentation, right? Like your dreams coming true right here, right now. And so the possibilities of dreaming have to do it as well with how we use that media, right? So they were talking about how it was sort of like the right wing being completely organized with all these resources, just putting out all this wrong information, all these lies. So they're constantly working at this. They have a program, and they have a vision, and they have plans, and they have all the resources to do so. So they were sort of also calling towards an organization of our movements to do the same, to use the same tools to spread those dreams and those horizons of liberation. And I thought that was just impressive for our first panel, and right, like we were talking about, like, oh my God, this is just the first one, like, so what is coming? So yeah, and it has not disappointed. So
not at all.
So beautiful.
It is. It's like the only time that I ever get to talk about imperialism or learn about it is in the Red Nation study group. And that is it.
Yeah.
Not with my friends, not with my family, not people outside of Red Nation. If I said the word imperialism, they wouldn't even fully understand what that means. And it's just completely like just flips it all on its side. I don't even know. But it's just so like, it's just such an experience to enter a huge space full of all these people, and every single one just understands, and it comes from their lived experiences.
Exactly.
One thing, and I did say this in my talk too, but one thing that I also found kind of like what a crazy coincidence was the document for the World Social Alternative. It was so similar to the Red Deal, like the the demands that we had in the Red Deal are just it was almost like a copy paste, except instead of it just being a short book, it was like just listed. We and I think that speaks to that too. Like they didn't even have to like write anything about it or like add any kind of analysis. They're like, oh yeah, we just want these things. Like and it was just listed out like that. Another thing too was the Red Nation right now, currently, like literally yesterday, we were reading through the Tricontinental Peace Hyperimperialism for our past couple study groups. And the document of the World Social Alternative opens with all of the statistics from hyper-imperialism, which it's basically just explaining that the US has reached a level of imperialism where the only thing that they have is its force. They've exceeded having the means of production and having I forget what the third one is. I always do. I'm sorry. But but basically their only option to maintain any kind of dominance in the world is through their force. And so like they have no they have no like project. The US is without a project. They don't have any kind of social like goals. I forget the exact wording in the piece, but basically because there's no social project, they just have force, and that's it. Like
to maintain that hegemony.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And coming to Venezuela and seeing how they don't rely on force to maintain to create that for themselves. Exactly. And it's through the people is like it's real.
Yeah. And they were just actually today by closing they told us a little bit about the social organization that allows this type of project to continue to thrive, because it is precisely organized in every single street, in every single, block, in every single piece of this land is organized so that this project actually works and actually speaks from the people and nurtures itself from the people's needs and people's voices. So it is very much like Cuba. Cuba also, because of the possibilities that it entails to have the whole political scheme towards one same project. So all the efforts of the social and cultural and political, efforts are geared towards that same purpose. So like, even if you are, precisely because you can critique it and you can express yourself, is that it becomes a stronger project. So you don't have to silence people. You don't have to censor them. You don't have to stop protests or call people out or anything like that. Or so like those leaderships, those building of leaderships are happening from those streets and from those blocks. And people could decide whether they want to go in that route or not. But it's there. The possibility that it's there is what makes the difference. And that contrast with this other social order that we're being imposed through violence, through militarization, through consumerism, and the ever it just continues to get worse and harder to maintain this life, that this capitalist lifestyle. It just makes it harder. You have to work more.
Gets more isolating.
Exactly. You're isolated. Your dreams are crushed as time goes by, as lives go by. And so we have all these devices and we can supposedly socialize and love and do all these things through them, right?
Starbucks.
Exactly. But it is not real. So yeah, nothing beats that local organizer, that in-person reality. And you can just feel it here. Of course, we're in election time, so it's more vibrant, I'm sure. But at the same time, I just think that it's just being around all these intellectuals and, organic leaders from all over the world expressing their different like levels and timelines of their struggle, and just all of them unison, right? They're all thanking Venezuela for being that example. And it's just an amazing feeling of solidarity and also like an encouragement to go back and work harder, do more, express more. And it's been beautiful. And I think it's great that you're here, Justine, because because it's precisely a lot of the work that you do, and it's important to get that. It's priceless what we're getting here, and we're very honored in that way. And so after that first panel, the second panel was about these challenges that we're facing, and then they had this really nice one on self-determination, and then the one for reparations and rights of the peoples. That's where Justine, where you talked. And so I also like those reflections around self-determination as the center or the matrix of all rights. Like without self-determination, you cannot have health, you cannot have access to work, you cannot have access to a real life without self-determination. So it was really interesting listening all the different notions of self-determination coming from the struggles. And I really like that because self-determination can also be a term that has been appropriated by United Nations and, even, financial institutions to pursue a program of more capitalism, more displacement, more extractivism. So it's really interesting to hear it as, again, people are asked and invited to participate in these panels, but really it's all just about this one line, right? Like, can you talk about this from your experience, right? And at the same time that we're all arriving to similar conclusions, although it's coming from different spaces and different timeframes. And so I really like that. So that was day one.
Yeah. Also, too, like, the way that it all comes from a very just like hardcore and principled place of resistance. Yes. And they name it as that.
Yeah.
Like if you say resistance in the US, it's automatically like violent.
Yes.
You're a terrorist. And like here, they just they understand it as like the guiding principle of what they're up against. And it's just, again, so refreshing. Day one. So day two, again, we have a alternative for unalterable peace, alternative for economic justice, alternative for justice in politics. How did you feel about today?
I think today was a lot more focused, in-depth panels. Like it wasn't as general topics. It was more about specifics on how to precisely produce cultures of justice, cultures of like a political culture that is aiming towards that same objective, but that is also realizing the past, colonization, capitalist industrialization, and all the different traumas and impacts that it has had on many societies. So like, also there was this one particular panel on justice that was highlighting the need for the left of the left movements of the global south to basically take the revolution to the judicial systems, the judicial power. That one was particularly enlightening to me because I believe that, they kept referring and even quoting sometimes Hugo Chávez for so unabashedly brave, full of bravery, how he went to all these different spaces and created other spaces, like, out of precise that need to start that conversation. So, but at the same time, he was, as he was opening these spaces or knocking at these doors that, granted, some of them would not lead to anything, but the fact that he was, like you said, expressively saying that this is what we need, this is what we need to change, this is how the revolution is going to look, then it's part of that resistance language that, it's not about the language, it's about the actions that bring that language to life. They were talking about how in order to get to that point of social justice, we need to actually revolutionize those systems of justice and how justice is brought to people by, they were literally saying, taking over the judicial powers, like shifting them from these elites and make them truly represent the people and truly represent the historical need for reparations, for the freeing of all the political prisoners of the world. And we heard about Leonard Peltier a couple of times, and that was really nice. That Elder Leonard Peltier is included in that list of. They also mentioned Assange and his recent liberation, and a few other leaders from Latin America and environmental defenders that are imprisoned, and many of them, it wasn't a lot of talk about that, but dozens of them get murdered every year, for defending their land, defending their forests, their rivers. And so, that was one. That particular panel was very enlightening, and then that one was followed by, I think it was the last one, right?
Yeah, I think so.
And and I wanted to ask you, because we were talking about that on our way in the bus, about identity politics and politics of representation as this other face of this, this propaganda machine that in many ways is like this liberal many arms, right? Like the octopus. It's like it's everywhere, right? And liberalism is everywhere. And liberalism as the way that these imperialists' objectives get actually into people's homes. So we were talking about that because there was one particular presentation that talked about how we could be this liberal appropriation of identity can be precisely funded by this imperialist regime to just make us, divide us and just, be struggling to get one piece of the cake or one slice of the cake, and is your slice bigger than mine? And so they get us all entertained while at the same time nothing changes. And so this is very much connected with media and social networks and the impact of that. So I wanted to bring that up because you were mentioning your point of view on that.
Yeah. So listening to this particular speaker, the way that he was presenting it, and then too also, I should say the majority of the presentations are in Spanish, and mi español es pequeño. And so I've been wearing a headset with a radio translator, and often it is more difficult to hear everything or to really grasp it in its entirety. Yeah. But I still do the best I can, paying attention to the translator. So when I was listening to this speaker, he was to me it seemed like he was saying that the intersectionalities of women's rights, of anti-racism and all these other things was I get what you were saying, he was presenting it like it was something that is, I guess, counterproductive in the way that people get caught up in the identity of the whole thing. And I was kind of going back and forth on how I feel about it, because the intersectionality, especially in the US, really matters for, especially when we're talking about just anything in the US, indigenous rights, Black rights, women's rights, all these things. And they are intersectional, for a reason, because you have to go into each, complexities of each individual one. But I think what he was trying to say is that when you get caught up in the identity of all of this, you sort of lose sight of the whole one world movement, and that part I really understood. So it was definitely challenging my my internal politics. I'm glad I talked it out with you, because I did appreciate like just that reaffirming that like
Yes.
of the of being intersectional about of things. But I get what he was trying to say.
Yeah, I thought that it was maybe like not very fortunate usage of the category and the term, because it in fact does. It's so important that our analysis is intersectional from, you know, understanding gender, race, class, regime, because what this analysis brings is the ability for us to, instead of adding up all these different elements of that bring inequality or that bring injustice, what you can actually start looking is how complex it can get when, you know, it's not only dealing with the fact that you're a woman, but also leading with the fact that you're a Black woman or an indigenous woman or a mestizo person that's migrating. So like all those different aspects, it's what intersectionality is trying to visibilize, because they're usually just seen as different aspects that do not relate to each other when they're precisely, you know, all together in one person's, for example, one person's struggle. But that's also within communities. So communities also can be analyzed intersectionally. And so maybe this speaker was talking about more about the appropriation of, you know, whiteness in the identity politics and politics of representation, where they use precisely, they appropriate the you know, the analysis that intersectionality can bring to sort of say, I understood it that way, that he was criticizing it because it was dividing us. But that's because he's saying that it is precisely those, this white feminism, this European feminism that appropriates some of these analyses. Those are the NGOs, or those are the institutions that get funded by imperialism or that do not pose a threat to that liberal scheme. So I think he was just talking about how intersectionality could divide us further, but I just think it's just not the right term, because that's not what it's precisely this other machine, this appropriation by white feminism in certain spaces, in certain struggles that precisely can, I mean, it just like with any other propaganda, it can just manipulate people, manipulate mindsets, and, you know, sort of, this is how identity politics works. You know, it makes us compete for little resources throughout, you know, this struggle of understanding how we can convene together. So I think a lot of the conclusions of these panels today were more about how it is important to start working on uniting regionally and bringing programs, you know, work programs that could help us unite the struggles towards one particular objective, which in this case is, they all agreed pretty much that it has to be anti-imperialism, that was the red line. You know, that you could be anti-racist and you could be all these other things, but you're not anti-imperialists. If we're not anti-imperialists, then we cannot truly achieve that. You know, we cannot bring down this machine. So and liberate their people.
Also, they were naming the US like by name in all of this, and that was pretty sweet. Like, just again, like, if you were to say any of this like back in the US, it would be just such a like radical and concept, and sorry, I just have a lot of thoughts going through my head right now, because because honestly, ultimately what all of this does for me, hearing all of this here in Venezuela, is it just makes me think of home. It makes me think of the people at home. It makes me think of our tribal leaders at home, and I'm just like, it makes me kind of sad. Like, I'm here getting emotional because I'm just like, we don't have to live under the boot of imperialism. Like, we don't have to live our lives like that. Like, we don't have to be alone. We don't have to be isolated as peoples out there. Like, we can expand to the entire world of the global south and join the struggle and help them, like help the anti-imperialist struggle and join it and get it for all, man. Like,
yeah,
I just, again, in referencing my talk, like, I was just like, yo, like, I come from a place where like tribal leaders are offering their sympathies to Trump for getting shot at and Biden for catching COVID, or going on APAC tours to Israel, or gosh, was the other, oh gosh, there's just like a whole lot of just coming here from all of that. Like, this is all within like the last 2 weeks. I'm just like, Venezuela is really just giving me the time and space to like love my people in a way that is like very like yeah, it's hopes and dreams, but it's also just like how do I translate all of this into back home? Because if anything, like, Venezuela tells me that it is real, it is material, it has happened and continues to happen. And the entire reason that we're here to witness the presidential elections is because we're witnessing the Venezuelan people protect the Bolivarian revolution.
Exactly.
They're protecting their own revolution because there was a revolution that happened at all. And it's like, what if we did that for the Pueblo Revolt? What if we protected the Pueblo Revolt, man? Like, what if we, what if we did that?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
how would that look like?
I mean, it's anti-imperialist. It's kicking out the settler state. That's what Pope did. He kicked out the Spanish conquistadors for 12 years, and they went to El Paso, and like, I understand, like, it's a different time. Like, yeah. we're not talking about like we think all the settlers should leave. Like, we talked about this before. Yeah. but what it is, it's getting that like self-determination and sovereignty for the people in a material way.
Yeah.
And like, what if we protected those ideals for ourselves and also in a very democratic way, in a very justified way? And I just, sometimes I find myself like falling into like liberalism because I just get so demoralized from choosing a revolutionary path. And choosing a revolutionary path in the US is just...
very difficult.
It is hard. You can't do a goddamn thing over there. Like, I have lost so many people close to me. And there's a lot that I don't talk about, but like, it's because it's literally because like we go into the street and we just demand like basic dignity. And that's like the thing that like estranges me from some of the closest people to me. And it's like, and we're not even talking about like things like sovereignty. Yeah. We're not even talking about nationhood. We're not even talking about anti-imperialism. We're talking about like, hey, don't put up that fucking statue of a goddamn colonizer again. It was already taken. Like, this is like low-hanging fruit. That is just like low stakes, and somebody got shot for it.
Yeah.
And sorry. You know, and I'm getting emotional because I'm just thinking about like what a gift to the world Venezuela is. And the people here, like, oh God, I just sorry.
I think they have so present the high price they've paid for this revolution, all the different ways that the U.S., as with many countries in Latin America and the global South, has interrupted liberation processes, and it started right there. It started in Turtle Island. That is the first that the empire that the U.S. like that is started as an empire within its own territory, like what called its own territory, by invading and displacing indigenous people. So, as it is said now about enduring genocide and surviving and saying we're still here, I think in that same way, people have it here in Venezuela, have it so real, so close, because you yourself were saying, like, how long was this whole process with Chávez? I mean, it hasn't been that long ago. It's so recent.
I know.
So it's the same generation. Like, what are we seeing here? We see some people that are speaking from that place, from the government, that are a little getting up in age, but most of them are really young. So, like, still, this is something that is so prevalent, so present, and that's why they have such they're such proud people, and it's working, and it's like Venezuela has dodged all those fireballs from imperialism, and they've been able to do that because they're together and they're united. And granted, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been like that the whole time, but just like they refer to Cuba as the inspiration, Venezuela is the inspiration for this time, for this generation. And that's, I think, what's so emotional about it for you, because you wish you could share it like that with your people and with your tribes. And it's to me, it just feels like it is just like that. I wish the same for Mexico. I wish most people in Mexico would be open enough to understand what this means and how important and transcendent it is for the world, for the liberation of the world. I mean, where we're at right now with this, late liberalism and, imperialism and decadence that is just lethal right now, because it's just falling apart, and like no project, no social project, nothing to sustain it. It's unsustainable. So what is it doing is just basically making do through violence, through military presence. And so, like, the threat is still there, and people here in Venezuela are very aware, and they're organizing, and you can just feel the energy around. So it of course we're here now, and we can support now. We need to go back and continue that, showing that support and that solidarity, not just for Venezuela and because of Venezuela, because it's like we take that with us back to our homes, back to our spaces, and try to find ways to nurture that conversation, nurture that discussion, because it has to happen. It has to happen in order for this to continue. And what they were talking about, this regional transformation has to happen materially, has to be direct, it has to be revolutionary like that. And I don't know, like I particularly feel like there is such a demonization around Venezuela and around all these struggles. But that is all propaganda. I really believe that if more people were to just read more and talk about it more, they would come to see that those lies, that mask is coming off, like, and we must help it come off. We must make this veil fall down forever, so that we can be strong, so that we can be hopeful again. And all countries in Latin America have endured imperialism one way or another, dealt with many horrible instances where revolutions, independences, revolts have been interrupted, have been squashed, have been smashed. And when we have so much pain and so much trauma, and we have so much in common. They said that many times. Mm-hmm. Like, we have so much in common. Let's get to work. Let's put all those programs together. Let's make it happen. And this is just day 2.
It really is hot. Oh my god, the election hasn't even happened yet.
Exactly. We'll be back for more.
Yeah. Decades happen in minutes.
I know. And it's just been beautiful. Very, very beautiful. And what else?
I know. And and there's just so much to cover in this kind of setting, like in a panel presentation sort of setting. They did bring up like today is July 24th, and they were and they do, like, they're like, fuck the US, but also they're like, but wait, we also know that not everyone in the US is an imperialist. Like, we know that the US is struggling too. We know people are out there fighting also. And they brought up the protests and demonstrations happening in Washington, D.C. today, because Netanyahu is currently in Washington, D.C.
Exactly.
Mayra and I, in between panels, are looking at Instagram just to get bits of news, and yes. I haven't even done any scrolling. It's because we were literally traveling all day during the day that during the day that all of that news had dropped. And so by the time that I was seeing what had happened, Sonia Massey, or Macy, Sonia Macy. And so by the time I saw the video, it was already, I think it was just last night. And this has been going on for days in the US. And it's because, I'm not in the US right now. I don't have a cell phone signal. But like, it's definitely minded the struggles in the US and the people of the US. Like, yeah, fuck the US and fuck US imperialism, but they're not talking about, they're not talking about the working class. They're not talking about folks in struggle. They're talking about the people in power, the billionaires. There was so many good quotes. I wish I wrote them down more. But, it's just the same thing that everyone's always saying. Like, we don't need no more billionaires. And,
exactly.
We don't... gosh, I wish I had the quote down. It was really good.
Yeah.
But
we didn't need more billionaires. We need less billion people poor or something like that. Poor
we need billions of people... Yeah. Something else, man. Dang it.
I have it.
It was good. Oh, okay. Yeah, it was good.
And also, it was Simón Bolívar's birthday today.
Today's Simón Bolívar's birthday. Yeah.
240 anniversary of his birth. And Simón José Antonio Bolívar. So, El Libertador de las Américas, And I also wanted to point that out. There was this level of understanding through language throughout the whole encounter, that whenever they were referring to the United States, they would say estadounidenses, which is the correct way of saying, we're usually taught to say Americans, right? Americanos or Norteamericanos, as this like generalization that the US is all North America, or the whole continent.
Like all or both Americas.
Exactly. Yeah. So like I it's really pleasing to see the because language matters, and it's not about fighting one another about what language or what language not to use, but rather have this understanding of why it's important to say estadounidenses and not American, not Americanos. So like it's when referring to the empire, referring to imperialism, referring to this imperial force that has inflicted so much pain, horror, and violence in the world, it's important to mention it is the state and the empire that is estadounidense. So like it's also very important to just bring that home, and start. That's part of how we start changing and shifting perspectives, is through that use of the language and that awareness of why is this and not that, even though you're taught, or even though propaganda everywhere is telling you not to. So that was particularly, special to be here in Simón Bolívar's birthday, that this is all happening at the same time. Where this event is precisely at the historic Plaza Simón Bolívar. So there was a lot of music and joy, and just people coming back and forward while we were in this other event in this building. So like, yeah, it's just been, we're just full of energy. We're also very tired.
Quoting Hugo Chavez every day.
Exactly. Exactly.
Go to hell, Yankees!
Yankees,
100 times!
So, yeah. And yeah, just the warmth and beauty of the Venezuelan people. So yeah, we'll be back and we'll explain the second part.
Yep, stay tuned. This is just day 2.
Exactly.
We'll have more information on the elections and more to talk about later. Thank y'all for tuning in. And yeah.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.